The day was slowly fading, wrapping the small countryside station in a golden light. Clara, a woman with long brown hair, stood waiting on the platform, her travel bag resting at her feet. She gazed into the distance, where the train would soon appear. The sun was slowly sinking below the horizon, casting its last rays over the surrounding hills, while the sky was already taking on a soft indigo glow. Clara looked calm, almost dreamy. This was the journey she had been waiting for so long, an escape from the frenzy of everyday life. She didn't know exactly what awaited her, but something about the idea of this night journey reassured her, as if simply boarding the train would leave all her worries behind. Soon, a low rumble echoed in the distance, and the rails trembled beneath her feet. The train was arriving. It was an old model, one of those vintage trains with polished wooden carriages and steel ornaments. Clara smiled at its almost majestic appearance, as if it belonged to another era. It rolled in gracefully, taking its time before stopping in front of her with a soothing sigh. She stepped aboard, welcomed by the soft murmur of doors closing behind her. The inside of the train was just as charming as the outside. Deep red velvet seats, heavy curtains framing the windows, and lamps casting a warm, gentle glow, creating an intimate and cozy atmosphere. Clara found her compartment, a small cocoon where she would spend the night. A neatly made bed awaited her, with fresh sheets and a wool blanket carefully folded at the foot. She placed her bag in the corner, sat by the window, and let out a sigh of contentment. Everything was perfect. The train slowly began to move, and soon the steady rhythm of wheels on the rails filled the air, a calming, almost hypnotic cadence. The landscape drifted past her eyes, bathed in the last light of day. Vast fields, rolling hills, and scattered farms stretching endlessly into the distance. Everything was calm, serene. The countryside seemed frozen in peaceful sleep. Only the train remained alive in this sea of stillness. Clara lost herself in the view, letting her mind wander. She loved this feeling of detachment, as if simply being on this train already carried her somewhere else, into a world where time slowed down, where nothing was urgent. She had nowhere specific to go. It was the journey itself that mattered, a journey without a destination, simply for the pleasure of letting herself be carried. Small stations occasionally passed by, forgotten places where the train slowed down as if not to disturb the quiet. Sometimes Clara caught glimpses of silhouettes through lit windows, people living their lives, distant and almost unreal. She felt like a spectator in a peaceful film where every scene unfolded in slow motion. Twilight deepened, and soon the stars began to appear in the dark sky. Clara loved this gentle transition between day and night, that moment when everything seems to float between two worlds. The train continued on its way, unshaken, gliding gracefully through sleeping landscapes. As night fully enveloped the world outside, Clara noticed a small shelf in her compartment filled with old books. Some looked as though they hadn't been opened in years, their pages yellowed by time. Curious, she picked one up and flipped through it. It was a travel novel, a tale of adventures through distant lands. She smiled. It felt like an invitation, not just to travel physically, but through imagination as well. She closed the book gently, placed it beside her bed, and settled deeper in her seat. Outside, everything was quiet. The train, steady in its rhythm, continued through the dark, as if gliding into another world. She closed her eyes for a moment, simply listening to the murmur of the rails. Inside the compartment, the soft light of the lamp created a warm cocoon. Clara felt protected from the outside world, as if nothing could disturb her. This journey, this simple night train ride, was becoming something much more meaningful than she had imagined. It wasn't just about getting somewhere. It was a suspended moment, a pause between two lives. She was no longer fully in her own life, not yet in another, but in a space where everything felt lighter, simpler. The train continued through sleeping villages, brushing past dense forests and shimmering rivers under the starlight. With half-closed eyes, Clara let herself be carried by the night. That evening, She knew she wouldn't just be traveling through landscapes, but through her own thoughts, her own dreams. As she was about to drift into a light sleep, a distant whisper caught her attention. Curious, Clara rose and began to explore the train's corridors. As she walked quietly, she noticed that the other passengers were all immersed in their own worlds. Some slept peacefully, their faces relaxed under the dim light, while others, like her, remained awake, absorbed in reading or simply gazing into the night. Passing one compartment, she noticed an elderly woman sitting alone, knitting with slow but precise movements. Her fingers seemed to dance across the yarn, a deep blue thread contrasting with the golden light of the carriage. The old woman, who had seemed absorbed in her work, suddenly looked up and met Clara's gaze. She smiled gently, a warm, grandmotherly smile. Clara paused for a moment, returned the smile, and continued on her way. Further along, in another compartment, a couple whispered softly, holding hands. Their intimacy made it seem as though nothing else existed beyond that moment. Their quiet laughter reached Clara from time to time, soft, joyful murmurs that added to the serene atmosphere. She watched them briefly, unnoticed, feeling strangely moved by the simple tenderness of the scene. As she continued her wandering, Clara reached a more distant part of the train, where the compartments seemed older, less frequented. Everything felt quieter here, as if this section belonged to another time. Just as she wondered whether to go back, a clear, melodic voice spoke. "Do you like traveling by train?" Clara turned suddenly and saw a young man sitting by the window. He wore a dark coat and a slightly tilted hat, giving him an elegant yet mysterious air. He smiled, a playful smile, as if he already knew her answer. "Yes, more and more," she replied softly, slightly surprised by the unexpected encounter. The young man gestured for her to sit across from him. She hesitated for a moment, but the calm aura he radiated encouraged her to accept. She sat comfortably in the soft seat, watching him for a moment, this mysterious stranger. Companion. His dark eyes shone with a lively light, and his smile had not left him. "I also love trains," he said, turning his gaze toward the window. "They're where you have the best encounters. You find time to think, and besides, you never really know where you'll end up, do you?" Clara raised her eyebrows, intrigued by his words. "But we all have a ticket, don't we? We know where we're going," she replied with a slight smile. The young man gently shook his head, amused. "Maybe, but destinations aren't always what we think they are. It's as if an invisible conductor, somewhere, decides to redirect our journeys at the last moment, making us cross paths we would never have imagined. It's not always the ticket that matters, but the detours we take along the way." They remained silent for a while, watching the night landscape pass by through the window. The train moved at a calm pace, and outside, the stars shone brighter, as if they were closer on this particular night. The young man seemed absorbed by the view, but Clara couldn't help wondering who he was and where he came from. "Do you often travel alone?" she asked, hoping to learn a little more about her mysterious companion. He turned his head toward her, his smile softening. "Not always, but tonight I'm glad I'm not." His answer, both vague and sincere, left Clara slightly puzzled. She felt that this man knew much more than he was letting on, but she chose not to insist. The train seemed to have its own rhythm, and here, everything felt as though it unfolded naturally, without the need to understand everything right away. "And you? Where are you going, Clara?" She froze. She didn't remember telling him her name. "How did you—" she began, slightly unsettled. The young man simply smiled again, then shrugged. "Trains have a strange way of connecting people, don't you think?" Before she could reply, a soft melody rose through the carriage. It was a piano, an old one, somewhere at the front of the train. Clara turned toward the sound, surprised she hadn't noticed it before. "It's the music room," the young man explained, standing up slowly. "You should go listen more closely. It's one of the best parts of the journey." He gave her a slight nod, then walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the carriage. Clara remained seated for a moment, her mind buzzing with questions. This young man, with his enigmatic words, had stirred something within her, a mystery she didn't yet understand, but felt was ready to reveal itself as the night went on. Finally, she stood and made her way toward the front of the train, where the soft melody continued to play like an irresistible invitation. Clara followed the sound of the piano, her slow, measured steps echoing faintly in the empty corridor. The melody, gentle and melancholic, floated through the air, blending with the steady rhythm of the rails. There was something nostalgic about it, a trace of another time, like a lullaby from a distant era. Intrigued, Clara felt irresistibly drawn to the music. At last, she stopped in front of a polished wooden door decorated with carved arabesques, different from the other doors on the train. This was where the music was coming from. Clara placed her hand on the handle, hesitated for a moment, then entered. The lounge revealed itself as a vast, elegant room, a contrast to the more intimate, subdued atmosphere of the rest of the train. The walls were paneled with dark wood, and crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over plush leather armchairs arranged around small tables. In one corner, a large black grand piano stood majestically, and behind it, a man played with his eyes closed, completely absorbed in his music. A few passengers were already seated, some reading, others simply listening in silence. But Clara felt as though she had stepped into a bubble of tranquility, where everything seemed to float outside of time. She settled into an armchair near a window, where she could both observe the outside world and enjoy the gentle melody of the piano. The night sky seemed wider here, the stars even brighter, as if this room opened onto another world. The pianist continued to play, each note ringing with crystal clarity through the room. Hypnotized by the melody, Clara felt strangely moved, as if the music spoke directly to her soul, awakening buried memories or dreams she had yet to realize. It was both soothing and unsettling. As she closed her eyes to absorb the moment more deeply, she heard a soft cough nearby. She opened her eyes and noticed an elderly man seated at the neighboring table. He wore a slightly worn gray suit, and his wrinkled yet kind face was lit by a gentle smile. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said in a low voice, careful not to disturb the music. Clara nodded. "Yes, it's magnificent. It feels like this music belongs to another world." The old man nodded, his thoughtful gaze fixed on the pianist. "This train is a special place, you know. Many of those who board it never come back quite the same." Clara turned to him, intrigued. "What do you mean?" she asked, sensing that every encounter on this train carried a deeper meaning than she had first imagined. The old man sighed softly, placing his wrinkled hands on the table. "This is no ordinary train. It doesn't just take you from point A to point B. It travels through dreams, memories, and sometimes even through the unspoken desires of its passengers." Clara looked at him, slightly perplexed. His words sounded like something out of a fantasy tale, yet in this almost unreal setting, they didn't seem entirely absurd. "I've traveled on this train more times than I can count," he continued, "and each time I discover something new about myself, about others, and sometimes about the past." He turned to her, his gaze now more intense, almost piercing. "You too will find answers here. This train will bring them to you. You just have to be patient and let the night guide you." Clara remained silent, absorbed by his words. She felt a mix of excitement and unease. She remembered the young man she had met earlier, and the mysterious look in his eyes when he spoke of how trains connect people in strange ways. The old man suddenly stood, breaking the contemplative moment. "It's time for me to return to my compartment." He inclined his head slightly in farewell, then added with an enigmatic smile, "Good night, my dear. May your dreams carry you where your soul resides." Clara watched him walk away, his quiet footsteps fading into the soft atmosphere of the room. Now she was alone, aside from a few passengers lost in sleep or deep in their own worlds. The pianist was still playing, but the melody had changed. It was softer now, more intimate, as if the music itself adapted to the emotions of those listening. A deep sense of calm washed over Clara, as if all her thoughts and worries dissolved into the air around her. She stood up gently, careful not to disturb the harmony of the room. As she left, she felt changed, even if she didn't yet understand how. Perhaps the old man was right. This train, this journey, everything seemed part of something greater, something she had not yet grasped. Back in her compartment, Clara watched the night landscape continue to drift by. The sleeping countryside, the silent villages, everything now seemed full of secrets. Every moment on this train felt like a key to another mystery, another revelation. She lay down on her bed, the comforting rhythm of the train surrounding her like a blanket. Before closing her eyes, she cast one last glance out the window. Among the stars, she thought she saw a fleeting silhouette. Was it the young man in the dark coat, the one who seemed to know more than he said? Or simply her imagination, shaped by the old man's enigmatic words? At last, Clara let herself fall asleep, knowing that by morning, new answers might come. Clara sank into a deep sleep, lulled by the soothing rhythm of the train. The wheels rolling along the rails formed a hypnotic melody, and soon her thoughts faded, giving way to a dream, strange, both familiar and unknown, where the boundaries between reality and imagination slowly dissolved. She found herself standing in a vast field, bathed in the soft light of dawn. The sky was pale blue, almost unreal, and a light mist floated around her feet. Everything was silent. The wind did not blow, the birds did not sing. Only absolute calm. Clara began to walk, not knowing where she was going, yet her steps seemed guided by an invisible force, as if she were following a path traced by an ancient, forgotten memory. In the distance, she saw a figure. A little girl sat at the foot of a large tree, her knees drawn to her chest. Her blonde hair floated gently around her face, as if moved by a breeze Clara could not feel. Intrigued, Clara approached slowly. The girl did not seem to notice her at first, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Hello," Clara said softly, afraid to disturb the stillness. The little girl slowly lifted her head and looked at her. Her deep blue eyes were filled with sadness. She did not answer immediately. After a long silence, she murmured, "Are you lost too?" Clara was surprised by the question. Was she lost? She no longer knew. Everything in this dream felt both strangely familiar and deeply unsettling. "Maybe," she replied carefully. "But where are we?" The little girl stood, her bare feet barely touching the damp grass. She glanced at the tree behind her, then back at Clara. "This is where lost paths meet," she said softly. "Those who don't know where to go always end up here." A chill ran down Clara's spine. Something in the girl's words disturbed her deeply, as if it touched a truth she had been trying to avoid. She wanted to ask another question, but the girl spoke again before she could. "You have to find your own path, Clara, or you'll stay here. Like me." At that very moment, the mist thickened. The girl's figure blurred, then vanished completely. The entire landscape dissolved, swept away by an invisible wind, leaving Clara alone in an endless white expanse. "No," she called out, reaching toward where the girl had been. But there was nothing, only silence. Her heart pounding, Clara searched for something, anything, in the mist. Then, in the distance, she saw a faint light, like a star in the night. Without hesitation, she ran toward it. The light grew brighter with every step until it completely enveloped her. She opened her eyes abruptly. The train compartment was still there, calm and reassuring. The soft light of the lamp bathed the room, and the steady rhythm of the rails gently brought her back to reality. Clara sat up, wiping a thin layer of sweat from her forehead. That dream, it had felt so real, as if she had truly been there, as if the little girl had truly existed. Her heart was still racing, but the comforting atmosphere of the train helped her regain her calm. She stood, opened the door, and stepped into the corridor. She needed to walk, to center herself. The train still glided through the night, the landscape outside bathed in silver moonlight. Clara wandered without a clear direction, trying to understand the meaning of her dream. She thought back to the old man's words, about a train that traveled through more than just physical space. Was this what he meant? As she moved forward, she saw the mysterious young man again, sitting alone in an empty compartment, his gaze turned toward the outside. Yet he seemed to know she was approaching. "Still lost, Clara?" he asked without looking at her. She stopped, surprised to hear her name again, but this time she felt no fear. There was something in his voice that reassured her. "I had a dream," she began hesitantly. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected it. Then he turned toward her, that same mysterious smile on his lips. "It wasn't just a dream," he said softly. "What you saw are the lost paths of your mind, unresolved questions, doubts." Clara remained silent. His gaze seemed to see through her, as if he knew all her secrets. Yet strangely, she didn't feel exposed, only curious. "And the little girl, she said I had to find my own path. What did she mean?" The young man stood and approached her slowly. His dark eyes shimmered with a wisdom she did not yet understand. "We all have paths we must rediscover, parts of ourselves we left behind. This train gives you the chance to find them again, but it's up to you to follow them or ignore them." A shiver ran down Clara's spine. She understood now. This journey was not just an escape from the outside world. It was a confrontation with herself. The answers she was searching for might not be on this train, but this journey would help her find them. Discover. The train continued its journey through the dark night, but for Clara, everything had taken on a new dimension. These encounters and the strange dream left her with a sense of mystery, as if the journey had drawn her into the heart of a parallel world, a place where the boundaries between reality and imagination blurred. The mysterious young man remained silent beside her, waiting for her to fully absorb what he had just said. Clara, meanwhile, was thinking, finding her path. She wondered if she had truly been lost all this time. Was that the purpose of this journey? To push her to confront what she had never dared to face? "And if I don't know which path to choose?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. The young man smiled gently, his gaze still filled with that strange serenity. "Then the train will show you," he replied. His words echoed deeply within Clara. She felt she was approaching something important, a truth she had, until now, ignored or avoided. Without another word, the young man walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the corridor, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Clara slowly returned to her compartment. The atmosphere of the train was still the same, calm and subdued, but she felt that every moment spent here brought her closer to the revelation she had to face. She lay down on her bed, her thoughts swirling around what she had seen in her dream. The little girl, the towering tree, the misty field. It felt like a call, an invitation to explore something deeper within herself. Fatigue overcame her once again, but this time she welcomed sleep with a strange determination. Perhaps this night would bring even more answers. Clara dreamed again. This time, she stood at the edge of a path surrounded by a dense forest. The tall, imposing trees stretched toward the dark sky, as if trying to pierce the darkness with their twisted branches. The ground beneath her feet was covered with fallen leaves, and a light mist hovered over the damp earth. Silence reigned, except for faint, indistinct murmurs, as if the forest itself were speaking. In front of her, the path split into several directions, each disappearing into the darkness. Clara walked slowly to the crossroads. Each path seemed to call to her in a different way, yet none revealed what awaited at its end. She stopped. This was it. She was certain. The moment had come to choose. But how? How could she know which path to take? Suddenly, the little girl from her previous dream appeared again, standing near one of the paths. This time, she was smiling, her face calmer, almost peaceful. Her blonde hair floated gently around her face, and she no longer seemed as sad as before. "This is where you choose, Clara," she said softly but firmly. "The path you take determines what you will find, but you must be ready to face what it reveals." A knot tightened in Clara's stomach. She wanted to ask the girl which path she should take, but deep down, she knew that no one could answer that for her. This was her journey, her choice. "What if I'm wrong?" Clara whispered. The little girl looked at her with compassion. "There are no wrong choices, Clara, only different paths. Each one will lead you somewhere. What matters is choosing and committing to it." What you discover depends on how you choose to receive it. A gentle wind rose, rustling the leaves in a soothing whisper. Clara knew the moment had come. She closed her eyes briefly, trying to connect with what she felt deep inside herself. Then, without hesitation, she chose one path and stepped forward fully. Clara opened her eyes with a start. Her train compartment was bathed in the soft light of early morning, and the steady rhythm of the rails still echoed. A strange sense of relief washed over her. She had made a choice, even if she didn't yet fully understand its meaning. She stood, determined to explore the train one last time. As she walked through the corridor, she passed the elderly woman knitting in her compartment. This time, the woman looked up and smiled warmly. "You are making good progress on your path, my dear," she said, continuing her knitting. Clara nodded silently, feeling connected to the passengers, as if they were all part of her journey. Further on, in the lounge, she found the old man again, seated by the window, watching the passing landscape. She sat across from him. "So, have you found your path?" he asked gently. Clara sighed softly before answering. "I think so. I don't understand everything, but I made a choice." The old man smiled. "That's all that matters. The rest will come with time. The train has shown you hidden truths. Now it's up to you to accept them." She nodded. This journey had set her on the path, but the answers would come through the choices she made in her life. They were approaching the final station. The train slowed gently. Clara returned to her compartment to gather her belongings. Outside, a city appeared on the horizon, signaling the end of the journey. A soft melancholy filled her, but she felt ready. When the train came to a stop with a gentle sigh, Clara stepped onto the platform. Morning light bathed the station in a golden glow. She took a deep breath, savoring the fresh air. Turning one last time toward the train, she smiled. This journey was not an ending, but the beginning of a new chapter in her life. As she began walking toward the exit, a passenger, a man carrying a small kitten, appeared beside her on the platform. The curious little animal suddenly leapt onto Clara, climbing up to her shoulder before she could react. It licked her cheek, making her laugh in surprise. But in that instant, the scene began to blur. The platform, the train, the passenger. Everything slowly faded. Clara opened her eyes. She was in her bed. Her own cat was nestled beside her, waking her with gentle licks and soft purring. She smiled, gently stroking the animal, as fragments of the mysterious journey faded from her mind. But this dream was not insignificant. Clara got up. With a determined gesture, she picked up a letter lying on her desk. Without hesitation, she dialed the number written on it. She waited a few seconds. The phone pressed her ear. When someone answered, she smiled and simply said, "It's decided. I'm coming with you."